When you stop and think about the tech we use every single day, things like your phone recognizing your face or instant translation, even those image generators.
Yeah, making pictures out of thin air.
Exactly. It really does feel like we've sort of stepped through the looking glass, like we're living in this technological wonderland.
It does. And that feeling, that reality, is exactly why this deep dive feels so, well, necessary right now.
Hmm.
We've pulled together a pretty broad look at artificial intelligence using sources that talk about the four seasons of AI.
The Four Seasons,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a nice framework. So our mission today is to kind of map out that history, look at how AI is shaking up business right now, and then wrestle with the, let's say, tricky regulatory future that's rushing towards us.
Okay, sounds good. But before we dive into the history part, let's maybe nail down a definition. Because AI, the term itself, it feels like it shifts around a lot. People confuse it with just, fancy automation. What are we really talking about here?
That's a great point. It's crucial. We're working with this definition. A system's ability to interpret external data correctly, to learn from that data, and crucially, to use those learnings to achieve specific goals through flexible adaptation.
Flexible adaptation. That feels like the key bit.
It absolutely is. That's what separates, real AI from just very complex programming. That ability to learn and adjust.
Right, and once that flexibility becomes commonplace, we hit that thing called the AI effect, don't we?
We do, exactly.
Watch.
Arthur C. Clarke nailed it. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. The second we kind of figure out how AI does something amazing, like, say, reading text from an image or spotting basic
The
objects,
magic just vanishes.
poof, I always like calling it AI. So what we want to do is peek behind that curtain a bit so you can appreciate these things for the engineering marvels they are, even if they start feeling, normal pretty quickly.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this journey, starting way back. The AI spring. This takes root in the 1940s, right?
That's right. The ideas came from sort of two places. On the one hand, fiction, Isaac Asimov's 1942 story Runaround, gave us the three laws of robotics, kind of the first stab at ethical rules.
The ethical angle right from the start.
And then the practical side.
Hmm.
Alan Turing's work on the bomb during World War II, essentially the first working electromechanical computer. And then, really importantly, his 1950 paper proposing the Turing test.
Ah, the Turing test.
Huh.
Still famous. The idea that if a human judge can't tell if they're talking to a machine or another person.
Then the machine is considered intelligent, at least that's the benchmark. It really set the stage. And then the actual term artificial intelligence was officially coined a bit later in 1956 at the Dartmouth Summer Research Project. That really kicked off the spring.
Which it sounds like very quickly turned into the AI summer. Lots of early wins and maybe a bit too much excitement.
Oh, definitely. Huge excitement. You had programs like ELIZA back in the mid-60s, which could sort of simulate a conversation.
I remember playing with versions of that years ago. Very simple but convincing at first glance.
Right. And the general problem solver, which could tackle basic logic puzzles like the Towers of Hanoi. This early success created this massive bubble of expectation.
How massive are we talking?
Well, in 1970, Marvin Minsky, a real pioneer in the field, actually predicted that a machine with general human intelligence like human-level smarts could be built within 3 to 8 years.
Wow, 3 to 8 years. For general human intelligence, that does sound incredibly optimistic, even for the time.
It was. Looking back, it seems almost absurd. But I think it stemmed from a kind of conceptual misunderstanding. They figured intelligence was all about formal top-down logic rules.
And that assumption, I take it, didn't hold up.
Not even close. That hubris smacked right into reality, and that kicked off the AI winter around 1973. You had the U.S. Congress getting critical about the spending. And then a huge blow, the Lighthill Report came out in the U.K.
Right, the Lighthill Report. That one really poured cold water on things, didn't it?
Ah,
Said machines would basically top out at being like an experienced amateur at chess, and common sense was just impossible.
exactly. It was a brutal assessment. And the fallout was fast. Both the U.S. and British governments basically pulled the plug on major AI research funding. Progress just stalled.
So, what was the core problem then? Why did they hit that wall?
The main approach back then was expert systems. Think massive databases filled with rigid, rule-based if-then statements, trying to capture human expertise in very specific areas.
Okay, so like if a patient has symptoms A and B, then consider diagnosis C, that kind of thing.
Precisely. Which leads us to the interesting case of IBM's Deep Blue beating Garry Kasparov at chess in 1997.
Ah, yeah, huge news at the time. But Deep Blue, that wasn't really thinking like Kasparov, was it? It was more about raw power.
Absolutely. It was brute force computation, checking something like 200 million chess positions per second. It proved Lighthill wrong about the chess prediction, sure, but it also highlighted the limits of those expert systems.
Well,
Because these rule-based systems were totally lost, when faced with problems, you couldn't easily break down into formal rules. The classic, slightly funny example our sources use is telling the difference between a picture of a muffin and a picture of a chihuahua.
okay, yeah, I can see that. Visually similar in some photos, but no easy if-then rule works reliably.
Exactly. Brilliant at logic games, terrible at perception or, common sense stuff. So the real comeback, what the sources call the AI fall, or maybe the harvest, came when the field shifted away from strict rules,
Back towards what?
back towards statistical methods. Specifically, artificial neural networks ideas that had actually been around since the 1940s, but needed more data and computing power. This led to the rise of deep learning.
Deep learning. That's the term we hear constantly now.
It is, and the real watershed moment was Google's AlphaGo in 2015. Remember Deep Blue, massive search tree, lots of chess rules baked in. AlphaGo learned Go, a vastly more complex game.
How much more complex?
Well, chess has about 20 possible first moves. Go has 361 on a standard board. The sheer number of possibilities is astronomical. AlphaGo used reinforcement learning, essentially teaching itself, to beat the world champion.
Okay, that sounds like a different kind of intelligence, not just rules and speed.
It was a fundamental shift. And that statistical deep learning approach is what's powering almost all the AI applications we see today. Which brings us squarely into the present and how AI is completely reshaping the business world.
Right. So let's look at that impact, maybe starting with the job market, the sort of meso-level view.
Good place to start. The sources talk about this idea of the feeling economy. The thinking is we already saw machines take over loads of mechanical tasks in the Industrial Revolution.
Right, physical labor.
Now, AI is increasingly handling the thinking tasks, processing data, analysis, finding patterns, interpreting information, things that used to require, human brain power.
So if AI does the thinking, what's left for humans? Where's the safe ground?
The argument is it shifts the human advantage towards feeling tasks. Things like complex communication, empathy, building relationships, understanding cultural nuances, making tricky ethical judgments.
Stuff that's really hard to capture in data and algorithms.
Exactly. It's incredibly difficult to model statistically. So the idea is that's where human work will increasingly focus. But this creates its own challenges, especially in areas like human resources.
Yep.
Think about complex, high-stakes, relatively rare events like performance reviews or, say, dismissals. Very hard for AI to handle well.
Okay, so that's the big picture shift. How does that filter down to individual companies making decisions day to day, the micro perspective?
Well, companies face this new kind of delegation puzzle. Do they let AI make a decision entirely? Do they use a hybrid model, AI gives input, human decides, or vice versa? Or maybe aggregate humans and AI both make parallel decisions, and you combine them.
Lots of options. Depends on the situation, I guess.
Totally. And they're using new tools to help. One really interesting one mentioned is artificial swarm intelligence.
Swarm intelligence, like bees or birds. How does that work in business?
Kind of. It's inspired by how those groups make collective decisions. The idea is to pool knowledge. Could be hard data, could be human intuition or expertise, but do it in a way that filters out common human biases.
Biases like what? Groupthink.
Yeah, exactly. Or herding behavior, everyone jumping on the first opinion they hear. Imagine getting, say, 50 sales managers to forecast next quarter's revenue independently. A swarm intelligence system can then aggregate those diverse opinions algorithmically, reducing individual biases and often producing a more accurate forecast than any single expert or even a simple average.
Huh. Using the collective, but actively fighting the downsides of group dynamics. That's clever. Okay, let's shift again. What about the customer side, marketing?
Oh, AI has utterly transformed marketing. The big concept here is personalized engagement marketing.
Rename.
Meaning AI can automatically figure out the right product to show you, the right price for you, the best website layout for you, the most relevant ad message, all tailored to the individual customer, often in real time.
So instead of broad campaigns or simple A/B testing.
It's like millions of simultaneous dynamic A/B tests running constantly, personalizing the entire customer journey. Even things like figuring out which customer complaining on social media needs the most urgent response. Deep learning makes that level of granular personalization possible today.
That level of integration, that pervasiveness, it naturally leads us towards the future, doesn't it? and the big looming questions about regulation. Because if AI changes individual choices, the job market, and customer interactions.
The combined effect is massive.
Yeah.
It shifts everything, jobs, society, even global power balances, which means we absolutely have to talk about guardrails. Let's start small, at the micro level, the algorithms themselves.
Okay, what are the worries there?
The first big one is bias. AI systems themselves might be objective in how they run calculations, but the data they learn from often isn't. If historical data reflects societal biases, racial, gender, whatever the AI, learns those biases.
And might even amplify them.
Yes, potentially. Because it generalizes from that biased data. We've seen this pop up. Examples like facial recognition struggling with darker skin tones, or even decision support tools for judges showing bias is found in past sentencing data.
That's deeply concerning. And tied into that is the black box problem, right? Especially with deep learning.
Exactly. We can see the AI's output. Did it classify the cat picture correctly? Yes. But understanding how or why it made that specific decision, that's often incredibly difficult, if not impossible. The internal process is opaque.
And that opacity is a huge problem when the stakes are high.
For sure. Think medical diagnosis. If an AI analyzes a scan and suggests, say, a biopsy for potential cancer, doctors and patients need to understand why. What features did it see? What's its confidence level? Without that, trust and accountability are serious issues.
So it feels like this trade-off: maybe get better results with an opaque black box, or stick with less accurate but more explainable methods. How can you even regulate that?
It's tough. You probably can't effectively regulate the core AI technology itself. It just moves too fast. So the thinking is shifting towards regulating the application of AI.
How would that work?
The idea is to develop widely accepted standards for how algorithms are trained, how they're tested, especially for bias and safety. Maybe require some kind of warranty or safety certification like we have for, cars or appliances. That way the rules focus on outcomes and safety, regardless of the specific technique used under the hood.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's zoom out a bit then to the meso level. Jobs and society. We hear a lot about AI taking jobs. Is it just factory work anymore?
No, not at all. The conversation has definitely shifted. AI is now impacting white-collar jobs, even highly qualified professional roles. The source specifically mentions e-discovery software in law firms.
Right, sorting through mountains of documents.
Exactly. That technology drastically reduces the need for large teams of paralegals doing that kind of document review. That's just one example.
So the social risk isn't just unemployment numbers, it's something deeper.
Potentially, yes. One source brings up the sci-fi novel Snow Crash, and its, well, less than utopian vision. A future where widespread unemployment due to automation leads people to basically check out of reality and spend their lives in a virtual metaverse.
And with VR getting better and better.
That scenario starts to feel a little less like pure fiction. It raises questions about societal incentives. If work disappears for many, what fills that gap? Does society steer towards retraining and new opportunities, or towards virtual escape?
That's a pretty stark picture. So what are the actual regulatory ideas being floated to deal with this kind of potential displacement?
There are a few approaches. Some are more immediate, like proposals to require companies that automate jobs to reinvest some of the savings into retraining their workforce. Or governments could limit automation in certain sectors. France apparently put some limits on self-service tech in public administration.
Trying to slow the transition down a bit.
Right? Then you have bigger, more systemic ideas being debated, like distributing the remaining work, more evenly, shorter work weeks, maybe. And of course, the really big one, universal basic income, or UBI. The idea of providing a safety net decoupled from traditional employment. Very complex, very controversial.
Huge debates there. All right, finally, let's go macro. The biggest picture. AI's impact on democracy, international relations, peace.
And this is where the regulatory conflicts get really sharp, because different countries, different systems have fundamentally different priorities.
How so?
Well, you basically see two main camps emerging. On one side, you have countries like China, and maybe to some extent the US, prioritizing rapid development and economic growth from AI. They tend to have fewer regulatory hurdles for companies building these systems.
And the extreme example of that approach.
China's social credit system is often cited. It uses mass surveillance, big data, and AI algorithms to score citizens and can restrict things like travel or access to services for those deemed discredited. It prioritizes social control and stability enabled by AI.
Okay. And the other side of the coin?
That's the approach more associated with the European Union, particularly with regulations like GDPR. The priority there is protecting individual privacy and rights. You also see localized examples, like San Francisco banning the use of facial recognition technology by city agencies.
So it's this fundamental tension, push for innovation and economic advantage versus protecting privacy and individual liberties.
Exactly. And the challenge is AI doesn't respect borders. Data flows globally. Algorithms developed in one country can be deployed anywhere. That's why the sources argue that purely local solutions like a city ban probably won't be effective in the long run.
Meaning we need international cooperation.
That seems to be the conclusion. Some kind of international coordination is likely needed to set baseline standards for things like data privacy, algorithmic transparency, and accountability, especially for high-risk AI applications. Otherwise, it's a race to the bottom or just regulatory chaos.
Wow. Okay, so we started in this technological wonderland, traced AI's roller coaster history, and now we're facing these enormous ethical, legal, philosophical questions.
We really are. AI is forcing us to make abstract moral dilemmas concrete. Think of the classic trolley problem from philosophy class.
Right. Who do you choose to save in an unavoidable accident?
Well, that's no longer just a thought experiment. For the engineers programming self-driving cars, it's becoming an actual decision that needs to be coded. How should the car react when an accident is unavoidable? Whose safety does it prioritize? We are literally programming ethics into machines.
And the core difficulty underlying all of this is how do you effectively regulate a technology that's moving this incredibly fast when only a handful of experts truly grasp it, let alone policymakers?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? You need rules that are flexible enough for future breakthroughs, but clear enough to provide real oversight. It's a massive challenge.
Which loops us back, in a way, to that AI effect we talked about at the start.
Yeah. Think about AlphaGo beating the World Go champion in 2015. That felt like science fiction. Front page news everywhere. Monumental.
And today, just a few years later,
It's impressive history, but the cutting edge has already moved way beyond it. The pace is just staggering.
so maybe that's the final thought for you, our listener. What feels like magic today? Is it AI generating photorealistic images from text, solving complex biological problems like protein folding, what seems utterly extraordinary right now?
What'll become completely normal, maybe even mundane, in just 10 or 20 years, just like playing a grandmaster-level chess game on your phone, is totally normal today, whereas Kasparov facing Deep Blue felt like a turning point in history.
The impossible just keeps becoming the everyday, a fascinating and maybe slightly unsettling thought to end on.